welcome to Mountain Air Farm Talk. My name is JJ Barrett. I'm the Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources here in Wood County for WVU Extension. And of course, I have my co-host with the most, Evan Wilson. Evan, how you doing this morning?
Doing great, JJ. It's a nice brisk morning here and as we wrap up October in Wayne County. We're doing good today.
Good. And then, of course, don't forget Brandy Brabham over in Rowan County. How are you today, Brandy?
I'm good. My internet's cooperating so far, so it's a good morning.
Good. It is hard to believe that we're at the end of October. Halloween is just around the corner and trick-or-treating and all that stuff. And of course, the harvest season is, well, I guess a lot of places, according to Successful Farming, are already done with their harvest. So we're kind of ahead of schedule. So I'd like to welcome our guest today, David Brandt from Brandt Farms. How are you doing this morning, David?
Just fine, just fine. This might be a real treat or a real trick. I don't know which,
Well, we'll find out. So we appreciate you coming on. Of course, David is located in Fairfield County, Ohio, and the owner of Walnut Creek Seeds. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about cover crops. Real quick for our commodity minute, I just wanted to let our audience check out what our commodities are doing right now. These numbers are from the Ohio Northern Grain Co-op. Corn is at $6.45 a bushel. Soybeans are $13.29, and wheat is at $7.97. And of course, those are cash prices. That doesn't include shipping. Is that right, David?
That's right. Yes.
Those doesn't include shipping or if they dock you. So, but prices are pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and start right in talking about cover crops and welcome all of our audience. David, tell us a little bit. I know I talked to you a bit on the phone, but tell us about Brandt Farms and how you got started with your, I guess, about your operation, and you got started in no-till and in cover crops.
Well, right now our farm's about 1,100 acres. As soon as we get another 100 acres off, we'll be down to next spring at 800 acres, mainly because the 100 and some that we got left is sold, and they're going to put warehouses and homes on it. We're in one of the fastest growing development counties in the state of Ohio. Have been losing about 45 to 5,000 acres a year for the last 10 years to development. So it's been quite a big change for us here. And that's, that's just, I guess that's the name of the game, I began no-tilling in '69 because we were on about a 700 acre farm. My wife and I was there doing all the work. We had 85 Charolais cattle and 200 sow fair to finish operation. And we just didn't have time to do tillage with all the livestock we were trying to run without help. So I began with no-till in '69 with our first field. It worked really well. So in '71, we was 100% and been 100% ever since. Throughout the years from '71 till now, we've had probably 22 successes and 10,000 failures. And that's how we've learned, because of the failures. And we began with cover crops 6 years later, because as we kept no-tilling corn and trying to no-till some wheat and stuff, we saw yields declining, and we were able to look on some information that I was able to pick up out of Washington, that we could use cover crops and improve our yields, and that's where we started. And then we began with single species. We did that for about 20 years, just using rye or crimson clover or hairy vetch as a single species. In late '99, we started working with Steve Gross with the tillage radish. And that's when we bought our white planter, and we planted tillage radishes and winter peas in alternating rows. and saw a tremendous change in our soils and tremendous change in our yields of corn. And from in 2020, or 2008 or 9, we started with multiple species covers. Met Gabe Brown. I did go to Kentucky to meet him. I know my wife told me she thought I was crazy. I said that I heard Gabe talk and listened to him on some webs, and I said I got to meet this guy because he's trying to do the same thing we're doing, but he's doing it in North Dakota. And so I went to Kentucky and I drove down there, and I got there at lunchtime, just the time the meeting was over. And I says, I come to see you and just give you a hug and tell you you're doing a good job. And so that's became friends. We became friends together and challenged each other to learn more about how to use cover crop, you know.
Yeah, Dave.
So that's kind of the story.
Maybe there's a lot of questions that we want to get to, but you were talking about mixes. What's the big advantage? I know that's kind of come on the last decade or so. What's the advantage of these multi mixes compared to just planting, like you said, just cover crop wheat or winter rye?
Well, I think, sometimes we had trouble with not getting stands when we was using single species. Either you had a wet hole or you didn't get it in deep, you got it too deep, or you got it too shallow, or those kind of things. And with the multiple species, you have the opportunity, if one or two of them fail, the rest of them will probably succeed, And what we really see with the multiple species is they seem to help each other to grow and mature. And we see root zones from 2 inches deep up to 5 foot deep in the soils.
Wow. What's the biggest changes that you've seen in your soils due to using cover crops?
Well, it was really slow in the beginning with using single species, just because we just didn't have enough root growth. When we went to the reddish, we saw quite a significant change. And then when we went to an 8 or a 10-way mix, we really saw the changes. And now we can build organic matter in the top 6 inches, about 0.5% a year with our cover crops, And we're trying to do that after a small grain, so it has longer period of time to grow. It's really tough to get cover crops to work well in a corn bean operation when you're planting them November 1st and it gets cold, and then you kill them probably 15th of April. They just don't have enough root growth.
You think that I guess do we need to look at our crop rotations then? A lot of farms?
I think that's a really good key. I think, as we look at things and trying to learn how to manage cover crops, we can reduce herbicide costs. We can reduce nutrient costs as far as NP and K goes, if you pick the right covers. And so we're learning to shorten up the maturities. We're finding maturity groups maybe 1 or 2 days shorter or 10 days shorter, yielding the same as if we were still at the 112 or 115-day corn that we used to use, So that's been the real key for us, is learning how to manage the maturity groups of our cash crops versus getting cover crops in, because in the fall, if you can get it in October rather than November, you just get another 10 or 15 days of growth, and it really means a big difference.
Maybe for something right now, a timely discussion. Of course, we're almost to November 1st, getting kind of late in the game. What options do producers, gardeners, maybe people that's taken off corn silage or just got their corn or beans off, what options do they have this late in the fall?
Well, I think there's still some pretty good windows for doing things. Of course, I like cereal rye really well. You can go clear till Christmas time. You won't see much of it till spring, but it'll survive the winter. You can use rape, or would be another good product. Ethiopian cabbage really grows well in the cold weather, probably a little better than the rape does. We can mix a little bit of hairy vetch and crimson clover if you're going to go to corn. Now, it won't be very big. It'll probably only be about an inch tall by the time it freezes, but that'll be tall enough to have enough root growth to withstand the winter. And early spring, it comes on like gangbusters and probably reduce your nitrogen rates to your corn crop by 50 to 60 pounds of nitrogen.
That sounds good for this last year fertilizer prices, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, right.
The now you'll have to enlighten us on the Ethiopian cabbage. I've never heard of that.
Well, it's a plant that really grows well in 40 to 32-degree soils. It has a fairly good taproot to it. It's not like a daikon reddish. You know, it doesn't have that big a tuber, but the tuber will probably be as big as your thumb, and probably by spring it would be 18 to 20 inches deep in the soil. You know, it has parallel leaves. Cattle seem to like it pretty well if you wanted to graze it, you know. And it's really easy to terminate with either a crop roller or any normal herbicide will take it out, you know. So it's not a hard plant to kill, but it does a really great job of getting through that hard pans that we're seeing from vertical tillage tools or plowing or field cultivators, you know.
Okay. Evan, do we have any questions from the audience yet?
Not yet, but and you said how we can decrease our input costs. You saw a lot of interest here in the last year, 2, 3 years of people wanting to transition over to more cover crop utilization than before, or was it already kind of snowballing that way?
Well, it was kind of snowballing, but you know, with the help of NRCS and equip programs, and of course in Ohio, it's H2 Ohio and Northwest Corner, because of the phosphorus runoffs. We're seeing a lot more cover crops being used. We're having a lot more fun educating the producer to understand what he needs to do with these covers. You know, some people just like to have the cost share so they go as cheap as they can go. And then other producers, they want to get involved and understand, you know, if we'd use a 10-way species, what could I expect? And you know, most generally you can reduce by about $90 to $100 an acre by using a cover crop that you'd go to corn with, you know. And I think the hardest thing that producers have to do, and I see that I'm trying to help, is that, you know, they don't like to stick to a plan very well, or something happens, you know, the weather goes against you. And, you know, if you put a 10-way species in a field that's produced 150 or 200 pounds of nitrogen from the atmosphere, collected from the atmosphere, and put nodulation in the soil from the roots, and then they want to go to soybeans, it's a little tough to get those beans to yield because there's so much free nitrogen in the soil. You know, they just get really big. They look great, but they won't pod. So you have to stick with a plan, and that's why we try to really work close with our producers to come up with ideas for them to have a nice rotational work. And you know, with wheat at 8 to 9, and of course last year we sold some for 12. You know, 12 buckwheat at 80 bushels an acre is pretty nice return.
Yeah,
and then have a chance to go with covers.
I would think that we would try to get more people to put wheat into the rotation if they, considering what the price we've had the last 2 years.
Right. And, you know, I really think there's an opportunity to, even if it wasn't wheat, it could be another small grain such as rye or triticale or barley, just because of these small brewers. And even, you know, you look around at Kentucky, Kentucky's looking for a lot of rye for their bourbon industry. You know, I mean, there's a pretty good rye market, and some of these ryes are starting to yield pretty well.
Okay.
AJ, we do have a question in the chat here from Tom Bays.
Okay.
He asked, are you now using livestock to harvest or manage the cover crops in the spring?
We have not. We would like to. Our biggest thing is we listened to our university in the 80s and tore out all the fences and went all out production and put the cows in the barn and cut their legs off so they couldn't walk, you know. And now we wish those old fences were back. And in our situation, we went from 10 cars a day down our road to about 8,000. So if we look at building a fence today, we have to build a fence that will retain automobiles and not livestock. But I think it's a prime opportunity to utilize that cover crop to feed those livestock. It takes them off your pasture fields, lets your pasture rest, and it makes their pasture fields better for the next year. You know.
David, can you talked a little bit about that tillage radish. Could you maybe tell the audience about some of the advantages of that, when to plant it, and what that can do for the soil?
Well, the tillage radish or the daikon radish is a great radish. There's other brands. I mean, there's some of them called Jack Hammer. There's Clodbuster radishes. They're all daikon. Most of them are all daikons. They tend to have a large tuber. The thing we have to be careful with, we don't plant them too early because they tend to bolt. And when they bolt, they want to make seed. So instead of making a tuber, they'll make seed. So you want to make sure you keep them away from the heat in the summertime pretty well. You know, and they get a tuber probably in good soils. The tuber will be 3 to 4 inches in diameter and 36 inches deep, with a taproot another 4 foot deeper than that. They collect a lot of nutrients from the soil and store them because they will winter kill. And in March and April, it'll smell like a natural gas leak in the field if you got lots of them, you know. But there's a lot of nutrients they can store. Very easy to establish. The seed is like a little bigger than a clover seed. So you can broadcast it, you can drill it, you can drop it out of an airplane, you can drop it out of a drone. A lot of things will work really well with the daikon radish. It needs to have a nitrogen source, either 20 pounds of nitrogen applied if you're using them by themselves, or using crimson clover or hairy vetch or winter pea that would take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and let the root of that radish scavenge that nitrogen from your host legume crop, you know. But a great soil loosener.
Wow, how late can you plant those?
We need about a 21-day window before frost, so you can get them the size of your little finger. You know, if you can go in the last 2 weeks of July and plant them after wheat with other covers, they work extremely well and do a great job, you know.
I see you also have a part of the Walnut Creek where you have the seed cleaner. Do you have a lot of farmers that utilize that service?
At the present time, we're doing fairly well with it. We built the building 7 years ago. It was kind of a white elephant for about 4 years, if you understand what I mean. Nobody understood what we were trying to do. But we are now doing a fair amount of custom cleaning for people. And it seems to be catching on a little bit, you know.
Cool. Also, I think kind of an underrated cover crop is buckwheat. Do you sell a lot of that? I know it's more kind of a late summer type cover crop.
We sell a lot of buckwheat. We put a lot of buckwheat in our mixes. You know, most of our mixes will have what the producer would like to do, you know. But if producers have low phosphorus readings in their soils, if they do, buckwheat's a great source to bring phosphorus to the surface, because the roots of the buckwheat gives off an enzyme that breaks down unavailable phosphorus in the soil and makes it available, and that's to the tune of about 15 to 20 pounds per acre at a 3 to 5 pound seeding rate of buckwheat. So that's a real cheap way to get phosphorus levels up on the surface. And it's a great surface loosener for soils because it's a really fine root system that only goes about 4 to 5, 6 inches deep.
Now, I am curious, David, what you said you got some ideas from Washington. I mean, like from the USDA when you first got interested in cover crops.
Yes, I had an older gentleman that was working with the Eisenhower administration, and talked to him. And he was also a farmer in Marysville. And he says, I think cover crops will make things work better for you, David, in those clay soils. It helps loosen them up. And he was absolutely correct. And he was a pretty decent mentor for me. And then, of course, Chevron Chemical came out with the paraquat thing, and then Monsanto with Roundup. And, you know, we've worked with all the major chemical companies trying to figure out what works best for no-till. We've done a lot of work with Northrop King back in the 80s with their corn varieties, trying to find varieties that respond well to that cover crop, you know.
What do you work with any organic producers?
We have right now we have 7 organic producers that we are working with them on no-till and cover crop organically, and it seems to be pretty good. It's a whole different mindset of what we're doing for a conventional farmer, because we can get by with lower rates of cover crop for the conventional farmer because he can use a herbicide pass. As we look at organic farmers, we have to keep the seeding rates high enough to keep the biomass there to last clear through the growing season. And with if you pick the wrong ones that actually decompose quickly, then we have weed outbreaks in August and September, you know. So we have to make sure we have the right mix of our cover crops for our organic farmers to stand that longevity of that plant being dead, you know.
Yeah, now how did you get started with the Walnut Creek business?
Well, you know, in the 80s, I was doing no-till and cover crop and did a lot of speaking with Chevron and Monsanto and everywhere. And then all of a sudden, guys are calling me, hey, where do we find this cowpea, or where do we find winter pea, or where do we find rye? Well, you know, then I got selling a few things. And in the early 2000s, my son and daughter-in-law asked me if they would like to manage our cover crop business. And so my daughter-in-law manages it at the present time, and she's doing a great job. And I have a grandson that came back home that's doing the mixing and shipping, and it's worked out really well for me, you know.
Now, where do you source all of you? Do you grow some of those on the farm, or where do you source your seeds?
Most of our seed, we're growing about 1/3 of what we sell as far as the cereal crops grow. Most of the other seeds are coming from the Midwest or from the South. We make sure that what seeds we buy that has a 50 state of noxious free weed tag, because we don't know where it's going to go, because we ship to Texas, we ship everywhere. We ship a lot out to the Midwest, or we ship a lot to Washington State. And so we make sure that we cover all the bases so no one has a problem with anything we sell them that has a weed that would be obnoxious for their state, you know.
We have a
Oh, go ahead.
We have a question in the chat. Tom also heard that your crops having a higher nutrient content due to the cover crop program.
That's correct. Most of our corns, for the last 9 or 10 years, we've been running 8 to 12% protein on corns, depending on variety. Our soybeans are running about 42 to 43% protein. 38, you know. And finally, it's starting to pay off. We have got producers from 50 to 60 miles away to 10 miles away buying our corn now, because they found out it has more nutrient density. The cattle and the hogs perform better on it. So we no longer have to sell as much to ADM or Cargill or Bunge, you know. I mean, it's just, it's starting to be rewarding to have a good quality grain to feed livestock. And I think when we feed high quality grain to livestock and keep it healthy, eventually the meat's going to get to the store and be more healthy for human beings. So all the way around. If we make the soil healthy, it's going to help human beings.
And now, David, I have to get some questions in here for some of our gardeners. Do you have a lot of gardeners that contact you, and what seed mix would you recommend for our backyard gardeners or have raised beds?
We have a raised bed mix. It has 6 different things in it. The first questions we always ask: do you want to terminate it? How do you want to terminate it? Do you want to till it? Do you want to just mulch it? Do you want to lay it down with a crop roller? Those are the things we ask first. We try to make sure that they're not trying to grow cool things and things where we put daikon radishes, because the roots from the radish seems to have some difficulties with when we go to cabbages and those kind of things. So we make sure the gardener understands what's going on. We sell 1s, 2s, and 5s of a summer mix, a spring mix, and a fall mix that they can put in their raised beds or their gardens, and it works really well.
So it sounds like you're a big proponent of these mixes with several species in it, compared to just our typical cover crop is either we plant cover crop wheat or winter rye. You think that's really a big help to the soil?
Oh yes, yeah. Because we're adding diversity. We have to add diversity. I mean, it's just, if both of us look like we're pretty good size, if we ate steak 3 times a day for a year, you probably wouldn't like it very well, But if you had an ice cream cone in between or something like that, it makes it even better, So that's why we're really a big component of multiple species. We're building diversity. We see different enzymes come from the different root systems. We pull up more nutrients. We have plants that can bring up phosphorus and potash and zinc and magnesium and those kind of things. It's just understanding what you're trying to do and where your soil samples are and how to improve them, and to reduce your input cost as far as nutrients and herbicides.
Now, do you do a lot of, as far as for your planting, do you use the roller crimper and no herbicide, or do you still use quite a bit of herbicide spray?
We're not organic. Probably 2 out of 5 years we can get by and never use a herbicide, and it's going to depend on Mother Nature. And that's the real key with cover crops versus conventional agriculture. You can plow, you can disc, you can do the things to air out the soil and use a herbicide and put fertilizer on and respect the crop, because all you got to do is wait for the rain. If you're doing cover crops and you're trying to reduce nutrients, you want your cover crop to get big. I like to plant green. If it's 6 foot tall or bigger, I love it, because when you roll it down, you got enough biomass there to keep the weeds down. If we have a cold spring where the cover crop only gets 12 to 18 inches tall, we have to use a herbicide, because a crop roller will not terminate it. We have reduced our chemical inputs by 75%, and we've reduced our nutrient inputs by 90% of our operation, but we still use them. We still have them in our back pocket if we need them.
Right.
That's incredible to hear. We do have a chat here, a question in the chat from Ronnie Helmendaler. He said, you mentioned getting the seeds from the south. We are seeing some changes in our weather patterns. Are you seeing crops that in the past not work in your area being able to be successful now?
Yes, we're seeing where if we're using cover crops, we're able to keep the soil cooler during the growing season. Like this year, we were at 100 degrees for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Where we had cover crops in our cornfield, our soils never got above 89 degrees. Our neighbor's conventional cornfield was 114 to 120 those days. So anytime that the soil is over 100 degrees, all activity ceases in the soil as far as microbial activity. And you know, things just slow down. On our corn never slowed down. It just keeps coming because it has moisture and the soil's cooler.
Cool. Another question that I had, David, like for fall, can we go in and broadcast, say if we have a mix of you recommended the hairy vetch and say winter rye or wheat, could you just broadcast that, or do you recommend to no-till that, or at least broadcast and color pack it?
Well, my personal views on this, I'd love always to be able to put it in with a drill, because then we get good seed to soil contact. It takes less pounds per acre to do it. Anything less than a drill, we have to keep increasing the seeding rates, you know. I think it'll work broadcast, but we're looking at probably upping the seeding rate by 20 or 30%. You know, it's fast, it's easy, but success is sometimes limited to how much moisture we have in the fall to get it to grow, you know. And, you know, we've had wheat in the ground since October the 2nd, and we just saw it yesterday. That's how dry we are. So I think spreading it on top this year is not going to be the answer, because it's just going to lay there. We don't have enough dews or enough moisture to get it to sprout. I mean, I've seen cornfields that's been shelled in November that looked like they had green cover crop and it was shelled corn grown, you know. But this year you don't even see any corn or beans growing anywhere. So it's just been that dry, you know. There's lots of methods to get it out there. My personal opinion, when they call and ask me about it, you know, if they want to fly it on, if it's raining, fly it on. If it's dry, don't fly. You know, I mean, it just ain't going to grow. There's not enough moisture to make it grow, you know.
Speaking of flying, did you mention earlier that somebody was utilizing drones to seed?
Yes, we're seeing drones being used today. Most of the drones will do about a half acre at a clip. Depending on what seeds you're using, you know, a lot of these drones are flying on clovers, hairy vetches, where it only takes 3 or 4 pounds to the acre. They can go as high as 30 pounds per application, you know. And there's 2 or 3 companies today that I know of that have I guess you'll call them a flock of drones, 3 or 4 drones that they fly together, and they can do several acres at a time, you know.
That's neat to hear. I've heard of the pesticide applications, but I hadn't heard of seeding with them. That's cool.
Yeah.
David, tell us a little bit about the annual field day you have in April.
Well, we have a field day in April. It's always the first Wednesday in April. What we try to do is we try to get things planted in the fall, so we have things ready for them. We try to pick out 3 or 4 really good speakers that we know of, that they can come and learn by. And then we do a little bit of, depends on the day, we do some field work. We don't do much, you know, we go out and look at cover crops, identify species, look at the root zone. Some years we have a soils pit, and I'm getting tired of those because they sure leave a divot in the field. And a couple of years that you can't hardly get straightened out when you don't do tillage. So now we're using 3.5 to 4 inch soil cores and actually pulling them the day of the field day and showing the people what it looks like rather than looking in a pit. Not quite as good as a pit, but I don't have to worry about this divot in the field that the combine falls in, you know, or the corn planter. So I'm kind of anti soils pits just because we can't do tillage to straighten it out, you know.
Right. Now, about your varieties, do you use the conventional or Roundup Ready varieties? And are there, I guess, I know you don't want to promote other varieties that seem to work better with your crop rotation?
Well, I think, you know, we use some GMOs. Mostly soybeans are GMOs. All of our corn is non-GMO. We grow all non-GMO corn. If we have a problem, especially if we pick up a new farm that we know nothing about, and it's got foxtail and fall panic and so thick you can't walk through it, we will use a GMO corn there or GMO bean there to clean that up, you know. Otherwise, we use non-GMO soybeans. We use non-treated corn. We use non-treated soybeans. We wait till our soil temperature gets to about 68 degrees, which would probably be in our area about the 15th or 20th of May. Generally, most of our conventional guys are done by then, the first time, you know, and then we'll get started and we'll plant and roll. If the cover crop's big enough, if the crop's not big enough, we might plant and wait 9 or 10 days and see if we can get it big enough to roll, and then do it that way, or take it out with a herbicide, you know. We use a little bit of starter fertilizer on the seed, which would be a gallon or a gallon and a half of a 9-18-9, and next year it'll all be a product we're going to try to do with compost tea. Compost tea and sugar will be what we'll be doing next year. And we're also going to run a trial trying to run some soybean meal with sugar through an insecticide box on half of our planter next spring to see if we can do away with starter fertilizer.
Wow. Yeah, I was just getting to our what are some of the other research projects that you're doing there on the farm? Are you working with Ohio State? Or are you working with some seed companies? What's going on there?
Well, some of the work we do with Ohio State, most of the work we do on our own, just to see, because, you know, I get around to a lot of meetings. I speak at a lot of places, and you know, I was at a meeting in California 3 or 4 months ago, and this guy says, "Well, don't you think we could use soybean meal and sugar as a starter fertilizer?" And I said, "Hell, I don't know, you know." But I says, I got thinking about that coming back home on a plane. I says, "Well, that might be something to try." You know, we got beans from our cleaner that's cracked, and we can grind them, and, you know, why not? You know, let's see what happens. And that's how we learn. We plant a plot every year with about 25 different corn varieties and evaluate those into covers. We find that some corn varieties do not like cover. We find mainly if you're using what I would call a racehorse variety that takes a lot of nitrogen, it does not like cover crops. If you use a workhorse variety that tends to have a flexible ear, you know, might not have the potential of the racehorse as far as yield goes, but in that cover crop, it will out yield the racehorse varieties. You know, we look for beans that tend to want to branch, just because sometimes we don't get the stand we'd like to see, because maybe the field's a little rougher, maybe we didn't quite get it covered up, maybe the turkeys come and ate part of it, or the deer ate part of them, and we want these plants to branch out as soybeans, or we want the ear to elongate, and that's why we like to look at a modified flexible ear corn variety.
David, tell us a little bit about the how to contact you for Walnut Creek Seeds, and then some of the, maybe just a few of the, a little bit about some of the mixes that you sell.
You can contact me through Walnut Creek Seeds. Just Google that, or you can contact me through Dave Brandt. That comes up both ways. We're on internet with a lot of videos and those kind of things that should help you understand why we like our blends. You know, we have several blends that we like to put together for guys that's getting started, that's got cost share. They're a little cheaper. They'll do the job. And then if a guy really wants to fine tune his operation, we actually can do prescription cover crops for him, utilizing his soil samples and figuring out his timing, the when to get it planted to make it work better. We also are now doing farm to market things, or farm to table things. We're growing open pollinated corns. We have about 7 acres of a lemon yellow. We have 10 acres of Jimmy Red. and we have 10 acres of blue courage, which is all open pollinated corns, and we're milling them on a stone mill, making cornmeal and grits, and retailing them out there. And we're also growing 5 different artisan wheats that we're milling for farm to table.
Wow. I guess what genetics are behind those wheat varieties?
These are genetics that was done back in the early 1900s that we found where we could get like 50-pound bag of it somewhere, and we have propagated it for the last couple of years, and now we're able to plant about 5 or 6 acres of each one of those to use in our milling business. You know, the biggest challenge is getting the planter and the drill cleaned out when you're changing
Right.
varieties, and the combine's a real problem. You know, I mean,
What's the biggest difference between these older varieties and some of the new ones out?
well, the older varieties are might be a little more gluten tolerant. They seem to not like, and I shouldn't say it that way, but maybe it's the most easiest way to explain it. They seem to not like all the new technology that we have today as far as chemicals and fertilizer. It seems like some of these older variety wheats, you just plant them and let them go. Now, they're not high yielders by no means. You know, we're probably in the 30 to 40 bushel range on those wheats, but you know, we're not selling them for $7 a bushel either. You know, I mean, most of those wheats are in the 20 to 30 buck range when you get them milled. You know,
And I'm curious where you got the is like are you planting like Bloody Butcher or some for the ones that you're milling out into the cornmeal? What varieties where'd you find those?
We use lemon yellow, which was a variety that was grown in Chillicothe, Ohio in 1894 to 95 as an open pollinated. We have the Jimmy Red was grown in I forget where that was at, but it was here in Ohio in the early 1900s. And then our blue courage, I don't know where it came from, but it really is a nice blue corn that mills really well and makes blue taco shells.
Oh, I thought you were making cornbread there, but you're making taco shells too.
Yeah. So, and we did that because of the chance we were losing farmland to development, and we just have to have a different way of income rather than selling wholesale grains. I mean, you know, when we're just cutting the middleman out on some of it, not all of it, but some of it, you know.
Now, I found it very interesting. Do you or some of the farmers in your area, do they have contracts with, like say some of the distillers for your cereal rye or some of the breweries?
We have a couple guys that's doing barley for the brewer industry in Columbus, and work with them pretty. And that's a whole different ball game of growing that, because we want to try to keep the protein down on those varieties, because if you get too much protein in a barley, it tends to foam the beer, and then they don't like it. You know.
Yeah, can't have foamy beer.
No. The neat thing about the open pollinated corns, they're running so much more protein. The last 3 years, our open pollinated corn has been running 12 to 14% protein. And what we don't mill, we sell to, or we feed to our livestock that we sell to our freezer beef. We sell freezer beefs and hogs to the public also, you know.
Now, maybe tell us a little about what livestock do you have there on the farm?
Well, right now we have about 25 Duroc hogs that we're feeding open pollinated corn to, because it's 14% protein, so we're not using any bean meal with them. And we have 25 steers. Well, we're down to 10 now. We have 25 steers that we feed out for freezer meat for consumers.
Now you say what is this, like an open pollinated field corn that you're using?
Yes, correct. Right.
What variety is that?
We're using that lemon yellow corn for the hogs. For the cattle, we're using the cleanings from the blue corn and the red corn, and also from our soybeans, we grind the cracks and chips from that as a protein source. So most of the steers are fed cleanings from the cleaning facility.
What about what about some of our maybe good old standards, such as some of the annual ryegrass and some of those things? How do they fit into the cover crop world?
Well, I think annual ryegrass works extremely well if you can manage it. I'm not smart enough to manage it because we wait till it gets too big to try to control it, and then it'll stay around too long for us. You know, we do sell annual ryegrass in some of our mixes just because we know guys are going to chemically terminate it early. It kills really early, kills really easy early, but if you get it a foot and a half tall where it's starting to make a seed head, you can burn it off, but it seems like it comes back like gangbusters from the roots, you know. So we have to be, to me, I have to be real careful how I use it because it has come back to haunt me a couple times. And if something does that to me, we don't like to use it very well. Other people have good success with it though. You know, there's nothing wrong with annual ryegrass as long as you manage it.
Cool. Evan, do we have any more questions from the audience?
Not that I can see here. I'm just amazed and taking in information about using some of these cover crops to bring some of our nutrients back up instead of paying that fertilizer bill to put it on the field for us.
Yeah. What's really, it's really interesting how much nutrients are in the soil profile that is locked up because of tillage or because of a hard pan. And, there supposedly, there's enough phosphorus in the soil if we just could break it down to use it, and that's why we're looking at some of these species like buckwheat or Sudan sorghum or millets that help bring that phosphorus, bring that potassium up, bring some nutrients up. It's like we stumbled onto sunflowers that would bring up zinc, and I don't know where zinc is in the soil, but I just know on our soil sample we saw zinc come up when we put sunflowers in our mixes. And the nice thing about a sunflower in a mix, it makes it really look attractive during the summertime. And so, our conventional farmers don't go work on our neighbors saying, look at that weedy mess Mr. Brandt's got in his wheat field, So that was kind of a plus for us, We
do have a comment here in the chat. Sounds like covers in the high tunnel could slow down salt buildup a great deal.
Yes, it will. Yes.
What would you recommend for the high tunnel?
For the high tunnels, I'd probably be looking at probably rye or barley to help the salt levels. The barley would be a lot easier to handle because it's shorter. Probably put a little bit of flax with that because flax is a great mycorrhiza builder. Might even use some oats. We got to get the carbon to nitrogen ratio in that tunnel as close as we can to what we like to see, like a 30-to-1 or a 20-to-1, and those plants would help do that.
I'm curious, David, I never heard of flax as being used as a cover crop. When would you plant that?
We normally plant that after small grains. We have done it really excellently after silage because you still have that 20-day or 30-day window after silage before it starts freezing. Flax is a little purple flower, but it is the highest mycorrhiza host of any of the cover crops.
You're saying around Labor Day.
He's gone.
Is sorghum Sudan or Sudan. Those are the ones that really will help bring mycorrhiza to the soil. And mycorrhiza is what actually helps feed the plants we want to work with,
You're saying the flax, you plant that around Labor Day?
Yes, right.
Oh, that was kind of interesting. For the high tunnels, they would probably, I know that a lot of times I kind of shy away from suggesting the cereal rye, not always, but for our some of our home gardeners, because if it gets away from you, and it's really tall, they're not sure what to do with it.
Right. Well, I think barley might have a place to replace that, I'm really liking triticale. If you know anything about triticale, it's a hybrid of wheat and rye together, but it really works well if people have livestock, because you can green chop it early in the spring. Probably end up with a 10 to 12 ton of green chop. It's probably going to have about 20% protein, which is twice as much as the rye will have. It'll grow as fast as the rye will grow. You can go back in after you chop it and plant no-till corn and take it off for silage if you want to. So you could actually have 2 chops 1 year. And that's also gives you a chance to spread manure a couple times during the year rather than just once,
Interesting. Brandy, we haven't heard much from you over there. Are you with us?
I am. I'm listening away. I'm actually taking some notes and checking off some things. So very good, very
Do you have any questions for David?
No, I think it's been quite interesting. I learned a lot. So thank you, David.
Thank you.
We'll have to have David down for some of our dinner speaking.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Have you spoken much here in West Virginia?
No.
Okay.
Once or twice is all,
Okay. Well, we also have a small farm conference there in February. So
okay. Yeah.
may have to have you over there for that.
Okay.
Yeah. You're a wealth of knowledge, David. I appreciate you coming on the program. What, I guess from what we've been talking about, I would say that working with some of our producers, we really need to pinpoint what their goals and crop rotations are as to what type of mix of cover crops we want to suggest to them. Am I right?
That's correct. I mean, if to me, if the goal is to just meet the criteria of what NRCS is going to pay them for cover crop, just do that. But if their goal is to build soils, to make their farm more regenerative, to produce a better quality product, then we need to do more as far as giving them different species and then more species. There's nothing wrong with straight rye. There's nothing wrong with barley. There's nothing wrong with single species, other than it takes forever to change the soil. The neat thing we need to do, we need to get the soil covered. We erode, according to NRCS, we eroded about 5.6 ton nationally all over the world, all over the United States. National soybean average is about 49 bushel. That means we lose 3 pounds of soil for every pound of soybeans produced. Now, can you imagine if we would keep half of that there by using rye after corn to go to soybeans and reduce the erosion to 2 ton? That means the producer could save 31% of his input costs because his nutrients wouldn't erode away.
Wow, it's amazing. That's impact right there.
He could reduce his inputs. And at a $600 or $700 or $900 nutrient cost today, 30% of that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
And that pays for the cover crop. We do not need assistance to pay for cover crop when you think about curbing erosion and keeping the soil where it belongs.
Right. David, we're at the point here we're running out of time. My dad said that there's only 2 types of music, country and Western. So I need to know who your favorite country music artist is.
Oh, I like them all. I really do.
You like them all? Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, if I had a favorite, it'd be Dolly.
Oh, goodness. Good old Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
He's a good one.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she has a lot of good for our Appalachian area.
Yeah, I heard that she is coming out with a some kind of cake mix or something now, Dolly Parton cake mixes.
Yeah.
But I do, you know, that she let Whitney Houston redo that song of hers, "I Will Always Love You." But I am a little bit mad at her because Elvis asked her if he could cut that record. She wouldn't let it. She wouldn't give him the rights.
Yeah.
I'm a little sore. I'm a little mad at her, but
Yeah.
Whitney Houston brought it out. It was mega hit.
Before we finish up, I always want to tell you, you're always invited to stop and visit the farm. If you show up some days or close to Columbus, Ohio, we're about 20 minutes south of Columbus, Ohio, which is the capital. We're more than willing to take my time to show you around what we're doing. Because I really believe in educating the producer to do a better job to make our soils more responsive and make them more healthy so that we have a better climate and we have healthier food to feed the people.
Well, David, I sure appreciate it. And but before we let you go, what you were saying that after, when you soil tested, what are some of your organic matters in your soils now on your farm?
Well, the home farm's at about 8%. Most of the farms that we've had for 7 or longer years, we went from 0.5% to 3 to 4%. And we're able to build most of the soils about 0.5% a year if they're in when they're in a corn, wheat, bean rotation.
That's amazing, building that organic matter.
And
Again,
when you do that increases the water infiltration by 25% every year.
Thank you again for being on Mountaineer Farm Talk, and we hope to see you again.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Yes, have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Weekend.